The crawl called us backward, insignificant. But they didn't know what we had found, the words of their ancestors, forgotten for millennia. When I spoke them aloud, their smug laughter turned to stunned silence. And that was just the beginning. The holographic display flickered to life, bathing the dim room in hues of pale blue. Dr. Elias Trent adjusted his glasses, a purely aesthetic accessory in this age of ocular enhancements, and leaned closer to the swirling alien script hovering before him. Each symbol, a blend of curves and sharp angles, seemed to whisper secrets across millennia. His heart thudded with anticipation. This can't be right," Elias muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. The translator AI chirped in response. "Your input matches 83.7% of the linguistic patterns from Earth's Proto-Indo-European root derivatives. Confidence level high." Elias slumped into his chair, his fingers pressing against his temples. The implications of what he'd uncovered were staggering. The artifact, unearthed from the ruins of a crawl colony abandoned for over 10,000 years, contained fragments of a language thought to have originated on Earth. "Dr. Trent," a sharp voice cut through his thoughts. Commander Fiona Hargrove, head of Earth's diplomatic corps, strode into the room. Her crisp uniform matched her no-nonsense demeanor. "I trust you've found something worth calling me here at midnight?" Elias stood, clutching his datapad like a lifeline. "Commander, this isn't just something. It's a linguistic link between humanity and the crawl. This text," he gestured to the hologram, "predates the crawl dominion's historical records. If we can verify its authenticity, it proves their ancestors had ties to Earth." Hargrove raised an eyebrow, skepticism etched into her features. "And why exactly would the most arrogant species in the galaxy care about a dusty old relic?" "Because it challenges everything they believe about their superiority," Elias replied, his voice firm. "Their entire empire is built on the idea that they've always been dominant, untouched by lesser species. But if their roots trace back to Earth—" Her expression softened, a flicker of intrigue replacing her initial doubt. "You're saying we could use this to shift the balance of power?" Elias nodded. "If we play it right." The next day, Elias found himself aboard the diplomatic ship Vanguard, en route to the crawl homeworld. He sat in the cramped briefing room, poring over the artifact's transcription. The ship hummed softly, a constant reminder of the void separating him from the safety of Earth. A junior officer approached, hesitating before speaking. "Dr. Trent, the captain asked me to relay a message. We're entering crawl space. They've granted us limited access to their capital." Elias nodded, though uneasy nod at him. The crawl weren't known for their hospitality, especially toward humans. But he had no choice. This discovery demanded to be shared, no matter the risks. When the ship docked, Elias stepped onto the alien station, his breath catching at the sight before him. The capital of the Crawl Dominion was a marvel of architecture. Towering spires of iridescent metal spiraled into the void, their surfaces pulsating with faint, organic light. The air felt dense, heavy with an otherworldly energy. A trio of crawl guards awaited him, their reptilian forms imposing in ceremonial armor. Their black eyes, devoid of emotion, locked onto him as one stepped forward. "Dr. Elias Trent of Earth," the guard rasped, his voice like the scrape of stones. "You are to proceed to the Hall of Legacy. The High Chancellor awaits." Elias swallowed hard, clutching his datapad as if it could shield him. "Lead the way." The Hall of Legacy was as intimidating as its name suggested. Massive columns carved with ancient crawl script loomed overhead, their inscriptions glowing faintly. High Chancellor Vorexthal sat atop an elevated throne, his imposing figure framed by cascading holographic displays. His scaled face twisted into a sneer as Elias approached. "So," Vorexthal began, his deep voice reverberating through the chamber, "the humans have sent a scholar to entertain us with fairy tales. Speak, little one. What nonsense do you bring?" Elias resisted the urge to bristle at the insult. Instead, he straightened, meeting the Chancellor's gaze. "High Chancellor, I come with evidence that your ancestors' history intertwines with ours. This artifact." He activated the hologram on his datapad, projecting the ancient text into the air. Contains linguistic patterns directly linked to Earth's oldest known languages. The chamber fell silent, save for the soft hum of the hologram. Vorexdal's eyes narrowed as he studied the projection. Ridiculous. The Krall have no connection to your primitive world. With respect, Chancellor, the data says otherwise, Elias countered. The syntax, phonetic structures, and cultural references align too closely to be coincidence. If you allow further analysis. I allow nothing! Vorexdal thundered, slamming a clawed hand onto the armrest of his throne. Your kind overstep, as always. Be grateful we tolerate your presence. Elias clenched his fists, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Your ancestors' words deserve to be heard. Ignoring this discovery doesn't erase its significance. A murmur rippled through the gathered Krall officials, some exchanging uneasy glances. Vorexdal's sneer deepened, but Elias saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Enough, the Chancellor declared, his tone icy. You will leave these halls and return to your ship. This matter is closed. 2 guards stepped forward, their intentions clear. But as they reached for him, Elias took a calculated risk. I've only shared a fraction of the truth, he said loudly, his voice cutting through the tense silence. The guards hesitated. There's more: records, artifacts, connections that go far beyond this text. Suppressing this discovery won't erase it. Others will uncover the truth, with or without your permission. Vorexdal's expression darkened, but he didn't order Elias's immediate removal. Instead, he leaned forward, his gaze piercing. You play a dangerous game, human. Pray you're prepared for the consequences. Back aboard the Vanguard, Elias sat alone in his quarters, the weight of his gamble settling on him. His datapad chimed, and he opened a secure message from Commander Hargrove. Report, her holographic image demanded. It's worse than I thought, Elias admitted. They're scared, Commander. Scared of what this means for their control. But that fear makes them dangerous. Hargrove nodded grimly. Then tread carefully. This could be humanity's greatest breakthrough, or your undoing. As the transmission ended, Elias exhaled shakily. He wasn't just uncovering history, he was challenging the foundations of an empire. And he had no idea what lay ahead. Elias Trent stared at the cryptic message glowing on his datapad. His fingers hovered over the screen, debating his next move. Trust no one. The words gnawed at him, a stark reminder that he was in enemy territory, surrounded by beings who saw him as little more than an inconvenience. A sharp knock at his door snapped him out of his thoughts. He hurriedly shut off the screen and stood, smoothing his jacket. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a Krall attendant, her violet eyes cold and unreadable. The Chancellor summons you, she said, her voice clipped and emotionless. Elias forced a composed nod. Lead the way. The Hall of Legacy loomed once more, its oppressive grandeur pressing down on him. High Chancellor Vorexdal sat like an immovable monolith, his scaled hands steepled before him. The chamber's dim lighting cast shadows across his ridged face, deepening the air of menace that surrounded him. You return, Vorexdal said, his tone laced with mockery. Curiosity or arrogance? Elias maintained his calm, stepping forward with deliberate confidence. Neither. I come with proof. A murmur rippled through the assembly of Krall dignitaries lining the chamber. Some leaned in, eager to witness the human's audacity. Others watched with thinly veiled disdain. Vorexdal's eyes narrowed. Speak, then. Entertain us. Elias activated his datapad, projecting a rotating 3D model of an ancient Krall inscription, alongside linguistic data points. This artifact, unearthed on one of your oldest colonies, matches linguistic structures found in Earth's prehistory. Words, phrases, even sentence construction align with early Earth dialects. He zoomed in on a segment, highlighting key symbols. Your ancestors spoke a language rooted in our own. The Chancellor's jaw tightened, his sharp teeth bared slightly. Fabrications, he said with a dismissive wave. A coincidence. Your species is known for embellishment. Elias took a step closer. If that were true, why are elements of your oldest cultural myths identical to ours? The hero's journey, the flood legends, the celestial migrations, they exist in both our histories. Independent development over such vast distances is improbable. A low growl rumbled through the chamber. Some of the dignitaries exchanged wary glances. Elias saw doubt flicker in their eyes. The weight of history pressed against them, and they knew it. Vorextal leaned forward, his glare like a predator's. You tread dangerous ground, human. Elias held his ground. Knowledge is only dangerous to those who fear the truth. The tension in the chamber thickened. The Chancellor's lips curled in an unmistakable sneer, but before he could speak, another voice broke the silence. Enough, said a Kral elder seated to Vorextal's right. His scales were faded, his eyes clouded with age, but his presence commanded respect. We have dismissed humanity too quickly in the past. Perhaps we should hear him. The Chancellor's claws scraped against his throne, but he did not refute the elder. Elias exhaled quietly, seizing the opening. If you allow me access to your oldest archives, I can cross-verify the data with your historical records. Vorextal studied him for a long moment, then nodded to one of the guards. Very well. You will have access, but you will be watched. His gaze darkened. Step out of line, and you will not leave this world. The archives were nothing short of awe-inspiring. Towering spires of crystalline data stacks hummed with ancient knowledge, each pulsing with a soft, ethereal glow. Elias moved carefully between the rows, his eyes darting across the unfamiliar text scrolling through the displays. A soft voice echoed behind him. You seek the truth in dangerous places, human. Elias turned sharply to find a female Kral standing in the shadows, her features partially obscured. Unlike the others, her posture lacked hostility. There was something searching in her gaze. Dr. Elias Trent, he said cautiously. And you are? She stepped closer, revealing intricate ceremonial markings across her arms. Scholar Elira. I sent you the message. Elias tensed. Why? What do you know? She glanced around before speaking, her voice low. More than I should. The Chancellor fears your findings because they challenge the very foundation of our empire. Our ancestors, they were not always conquerors. They were wanderers, seekers. But that truth was buried. Elias's pulse quickened. And you want it uncovered? Elira's gaze was steady. Yes. But we must move carefully. There are those who will kill to keep it hidden. Before Elias could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed through the archive halls. Elira stiffened. We are being watched. Follow me. She led him through the labyrinth of data spires to a secluded terminal. With practiced movements, she accessed restricted files, streams of ancient text cascading down the screen. These records, she whispered, speak of a great departure, a time when our ancestors left their home among the stars. She pointed to a passage. This refers to Earth. Elias's breath caught. The evidence was irrefutable. But before he could process it further, a sharp alarm blared through the chamber. Elira's expression hardened. They know we're here. Elias grabbed his datapad, copying as much data as he could. Can we shut it down? Elira shook her head. No time. We must leave. Now. They darted through the corridors, footsteps pounding behind them. As they reached the exit, a squad of guards appeared, weapons raised. Vorextal emerged from behind them, his expression cold and calculating. I warned you, human. Elias swallowed, trying to keep his voice steady. Knowledge belongs to everyone, Chancellor. Suppressing it won't erase it. The Chancellor stepped forward, looming over him. You overestimate your position. His eyes flicked to Elira, his voice dripping with menace. And you, traitor, have chosen your side. Elira lifted her chin defiantly. The truth cannot be buried forever. Vorextal's sneer deepened, but he made no move to detain them. Instead, he gestured to the guards. Escort them to their ship. Let them scurry back to their little world with their stolen scraps of knowledge. It will change nothing. Elias held his breath as they were led away, relief mingling with lingering dread. He'd gotten what he needed, but the real battle was only beginning. Back aboard the Vanguard, Elias pored over the data they had managed to retrieve. Elira stood beside him, arms crossed, watching as lines of ancient script scrolled across the screen. "You've stirred the nest, Trent," she said softly. Elias glanced at her, determination burning in his eyes. "Let them buzz. We're not done yet." As the ship powered up, preparing for departure, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd only scratched the surface. The Kraul were hiding far more than he had imagined, and uncovering it might be the most dangerous thing he'd ever done. Elias Trent sat in the dim glow of the Vanguard's command center, his eyes fixed on the encrypted message flashing across his datapad. The ancient Kraul symbols pulsed rhythmically, as if whispering secrets only he could hear. "You are not alone. Seek the hidden path." The words gnawed at his mind. He glanced at Elira, who stood beside him, her expression unreadable. "This message," Elias said, breaking the silence. "Who could have sent it? Does it mean what I think it does?" Elira's eyes flicked to the screen, scanning the symbols with an intensity that betrayed her composed exterior. "It means you have allies, within the Chancellor's own ranks. The truth is stirring, but that makes you a target now more than ever." Elias exhaled, his fingers tapping a nervous rhythm on the table. "If I decrypt it, they'll know we're onto them. If I don't..." He trailed off, weighing the risk against the potential reward. Before he could decide, the ship's comm system crackled to life. Captain Wren's gruff voice filled the room. "Dr. Trent, we've got a problem. A Kraul warship is tailing us. They're not hailing, just shadowing our movements." Elias and Elira exchanged a glance. He tapped the comm. "Captain, keep course, but stay alert. They might not engage unless provoked." Elira's brow furrowed. "Vorextol isn't done with you yet." Elias nodded. "We're sitting on the biggest revelation in galactic history." "Of course he isn't." Turning back to his datapad, Elias initiated the decryption process, the ancient characters slowly unraveling into coherent text. A map flickered onto the screen, coordinates leading to an uncharted sector near the galactic core. Elias leaned forward, pulse quickening. This must be it. The hidden archives of their ancestors." Elira's expression darkened. "That sector is forbidden. Anyone who enters never returns." Elias studied the map, weighing their dwindling options. "If what we found here is true, then this archive could hold everything, the undeniable proof humanity and the Kraul share a forgotten past." A sudden alert blared from the console. The warship behind them had accelerated, closing the gap. Elira tensed. "They're not going to let us leave with what we know." Elias made a split-second decision. "We have to make a run for it. Captain Wren, change course. Set a trajectory to these coordinates. We'll lose them in the chaos of the asteroid belt." The ship lurched as the engines roared to life, and the Vanguard plunged into the dense asteroid field, weaving between colossal floating rocks. The Kraul warship followed, lasers lancing through the void, missing by meters. Elias gripped the edge of his seat. "Tell me this ship is faster." Wren's voice crackled through the comms, tense but determined. "Not faster, but smarter. Hold on to something." The ship spiraled through the field, narrowly avoiding destruction as the Kraul pressed their pursuit. Elias's datapad chimed with incoming data from the mysterious transmission, detailing historical records buried for thousands of years. "Their ancestors fled," he muttered, eyes scanning the text. "They weren't conquerors at all, they were refugees." Elira's expression shifted, realization dawning. "That would destroy Vorextel's rule. His power depends on the myth of eternal dominance." Before Elias could respond, a violent tremor rocked the ship. Sparks flew from the consoles, and an alarm blared overhead. "Direct hit!" Wren barked. "Shields down to 30%. Elira pulled Elias to his feet. "We need to act now. If we can broadcast this information before they destroy us." Elias nodded, rushing to the communications panel. He inserted the data chip, fingers flying across the controls. Sending it to every major galactic network. Once it's out, they can't bury it. The panel flashed red. Elira cursed under her breath. They're jamming the signal. Elias slammed his fist against the console. Think, Trent, think! His eyes darted to the map again. An idea struck him. The ancient archives, if we get there, we can use their own systems to broadcast. Elira hesitated. It's a gamble. And if it's a trap? We're already running out of options, Elias said firmly. Captain Wren's voice cut through the tension. Brace yourselves. I'm taking us into the thickest part of the field. The ship veered sharply, and Elias held his breath as asteroids closed in, a chaotic dance of destruction surrounding them. The Krull warship hesitated, wary of the treacherous terrain. Wren seized the moment, pushing the engines to their limit. We've got a narrow window, Doctor. Whatever you're planning, now's the time. Elias transmitted the coordinates to the bridge. Set course for the archive site. If this is what I think it is, it could rewrite history. The Vanguard burst free of the asteroid field, leaving the Krull warship momentarily stranded behind the swirling debris. Elias exhaled in relief, but Elira's gaze remained fixed on the viewport. They won't give up, she murmured. No, Elias agreed. But neither will we. Hours later, they arrived at the designated coordinates. The space around them was eerily silent. No ships, no stations, just a desolate world orbiting a dying star. This can't be right, Elias muttered, scanning the desolate landscape through the viewport. Elira examined the ancient script on the transmission. The entrance should be there. She pointed to a canyon hidden in the planet's shadow. The ship descended, landing in a dust storm that swallowed them whole. Elias and Elira stepped out, their suits filtering the thin, acrid air. Before them, an immense stone door loomed, covered in the same inscriptions Elias had studied for months. This is it, he whispered. He traced a hand over the carvings, feeling the weight of history beneath his fingertips. With Elira's help, they deciphered the activation sequence. The door groaned and slowly slid open, revealing a cavern bathed in an eerie blue glow. Inside, rows of ancient databanks stretched into the darkness, untouched for eons. Elias activated his scanner, the readings overwhelming him. This is everything. Records from their exodus, their connection to Earth, all of it. Elira touched a panel, her voice soft. Proof they once stood beside humans as equals. Elias pressed the activation key, initiating the transmission sequence. Not anymore. The whole galaxy will know the truth. As the data streamed across countless networks, a distant rumble echoed from the entrance. Elias turned to see shadowy figures advancing. The Krull had arrived. Elira drew her weapon, eyes narrowing. We bought ourselves time, but it won't be enough. Elias held the datapad close, determination hardening his features. They can't stop it now. The truth is out. The ground trembled beneath them as the first shots rang through the archive halls. Elias took a deep breath, standing his ground. Let's finish what we started. The ancient archive trembled with the weight of time and approaching danger. Dust cascaded from the towering databanks as the heavy footsteps of Krull soldiers echoed through the cavernous hall. Elias Trent tightened his grip on the datapad, his heart pounding in his chest. The truth was out, but survival was far from guaranteed. Elira crouched beside him, her weapon raised. They won't let us walk away, she said, her voice tense but unwavering. Elias wiped sweat from his brow, his mind racing through possible escape routes. The archive systems were still transmitting the data he had unleashed across the galactic networks. Every second counted. We don't have to fight them, he said. We just need to stall long enough. Elira's eyes flicked toward the approaching shadows beyond the glowing data pillars. Stalling might get us both killed. Elias glanced around, spotting a narrow corridor branching off to the side. That passage, where does it lead? Elira hesitated for a split second. Emergency transit tunnels. But they could be collapsed. Elias made a snap decision. It's our best shot. They darted toward the passage, Elias's breath coming in ragged gasps as they plunged into the dark corridor. Behind them, the Crawl soldiers burst into the archive, their guttural voices barking orders. Red beams of light sliced through the dusty air, scanning for movement. The narrow tunnel twisted through the rock, the walls damp and uneven. Elira led the way, her sharp senses guiding them through the darkness. Elias clutched the data pad, the weight of its contents pressing heavily on his mind. "We need to get back to the Vanguard," he said between breaths. "If we can." A sudden explosion from the archive behind them sent a shockwave through the tunnel, knocking Elias off his feet. He hit the ground hard, his ears ringing. Elira pulled him up, her face grim. "They're collapsing the archive," she said. "They want to bury the truth." Elias steadied himself, pushing forward. "Then we can't let them catch us." The tunnel opened up into a vast underground chamber, dimly lit by bioluminescent fungi clinging to the ceiling. At the far end, an ancient transport pod sat on rusted rails, its controls flickering weakly. Elias scrambled to the console, his fingers flying across the dusty interface. "It's old, but it still works," he muttered. "I can override the lockdown." Elira stood guard, listening intently to the approaching footsteps behind them. "Hurry," she urged. The pod groaned to life, gears grinding against years of neglect. Elias leaped inside, Elira close behind. As the doors sealed, a squad of Crawl burst into the chamber, weapons raised. Blaster fire rattled against the pod's hull as it lurched forward along the track, speeding into the darkness. Elias collapsed against the wall, exhaling sharply. "That was too close." Elira didn't respond immediately, staring out of the pod's window at the receding lights of the archive. "The Chancellor won't stop," she said quietly. "Even with the truth out, he'll fight to maintain his power." Elias nodded, staring at the data pad in his hands. "But now the galaxy knows. People will ask questions. The seeds of doubt are planted." Elira turned to him, her expression softer. "You risked everything for this. Why?" Elias hesitated, the memories of his father's failed research flashing through his mind. "Because the truth matters," he said. "For too long, we've been seen as insignificant. This changes everything. Humanity's past is intertwined with theirs, and that makes us equals." The transport pod jerked to a stop at the end of the tunnel, revealing a hidden exit that opened into the barren landscape. The Vanguard loomed in the distance, its engines already warmed up. Elias and Elira sprinted toward it, the wind whipping around them. As they reached the ship, Captain Wren's voice boomed over the comms. "Get aboard now. We've got company inbound." Elias clambered up the ramp, Elira close behind. The ship's engines roared, lifting off the ground just as Crawl vessels descended from the sky, their weapons primed. "We're not going to make it," Elira muttered. Elias gripped a nearby console, his mind racing. "We have to. We're carrying the future." The ship shuddered as enemy fire grazed its hull. Wren's voice cut through the alarms. "Hold on!" The Vanguard surged upward, breaking through the planet's atmosphere. Elias watched the Crawl ships fade behind them, his chest heaving with relief. Back in the safety of deep space, Elias sat in the war room, surrounded by his team. Elira stood beside him, studying the data they had retrieved. Hargrove's holographic form flickered before them, her expression unreadable. "You've done something remarkable," she said. "The entire galactic network is buzzing with your findings. Crawl allies are beginning to question their history." Elias nodded, the exhaustion settling into his bones. "It's a start. But it won't be easy. Vorextel won't let this go without a fight." Hargrove's eyes hardened. "We'll be ready. You've given humanity a voice, Trent. Let's make sure it's heard." After the transmission ended, Elira turned to him. "So what now?" Elias stared at the stars beyond the viewport. "Now? We keep digging. There's more out there. We haven't uncovered everything." Elira offered a small smile. "I think you humans are more stubborn than I thought." Elias smirked. "You haven't seen anything yet." The hum of the ship settled into a steady rhythm, carrying them toward an uncertain but hopeful future. Elias knew the battle wasn't over, but for the first time, humanity stood on equal footing with the galaxy's greatest empire. And that was a victory in itself. Final scene. As Elias prepared to leave the war room, his datapad chimed again. Another encrypted message, different from the first. "We are watching. There is more to uncover." He exhaled, a determined glint in his eyes. "Looks like our work isn't done."